Dr. Wu, we all know that Crimea, what happened to that, and the incumbent president got kicked out. Would Ma Ying-jeou, the current Taiwanese president, be facing the same situation?
It's hard to say because there are similarities and there are also differences between Taiwan and Ukraine. Crimea is part of Ukraine. Yes. But under the manipulation of Russia, Crimea became part of Russia as of now. And this is a development to the anger of major Western countries, including the United States. But were we able to prevent it from taking place? Probably not if the Russian leader decided to do it. The reason is rather simple. Crimea has a large population that is sympathetic to Russia or supported to Russia, or they carry their Russian background. Yes. So it's easy for Crimea to be taken over by Russia. But for Ukraine, it might be a little bit more difficult, even though Ukraine was also under the Russian influence because geographical proximity and also the overwhelming military force of Russia. And another point is that virtually all of natural resources of Ukraine comes from Russia. And therefore, Russia can exercise lots of influence over Ukraine. But Taiwan is a little bit different, and it's also have something similar. If you look at Taiwan right now, the government is very sympathetic to China. The government in Taiwan identified itself as part of China. The Taiwanese government obeys the One China principle. Talks about One China framework, and when you talk about One China, it's very natural for other people to think that Taiwan being part of China, and that's even though we don't recognize that, but the current government in Taiwan has already recognized that, and the current government in Taiwan also wants to sign all kinds of agreement with China to bring Taiwan closer to China, and that would give China a upper hand or a stronger hand to influence Taiwan. And One China principle, if Taiwanese government has solemnly swear to the Chinese government that will follow One China principle, and then one day the DPP comes back to power and says that no, that's not what people want. Taiwan is independent. Taiwan exists by itself. And then China will say, hey, you are breaking the promises of your previous government. And that might become one of the excuses of the Chinese government to use force against Taiwan or to pressure Taiwan to yield some political power to China. And right now, what I'm concerned the most is that the Taiwanese government continue to sign economic agreement with China.
That is very dangerous.
Very dangerous. And the reason is because Taiwanese will started to see that Taiwan will not survive without the Chinese support economically. And then the Chinese government will come in and pressure Taiwan for political agreements.
Is the situation that bad already, or?
It's not as bad, but what I see is that we might be moving along that direction. If Taiwan continue to look at China as a solution of Taiwan's economy, and then there's quite natural for China to say to Taiwan that you have to agree to that, you have to agree to this or that, in order for the Chinese government to continue to provide economic benefit. And what the Chinese government want is actually very clear. They've said it openly. They don't hide their intentions. They say that Taiwan needs to follow the One China principle, and Taiwan needs to sign an agreement with China on ending hostility, i.e. ending civil war. And then Taiwan needs to sign with China a peace agreement, which is institutionalization of One China principle and ending the civil war. When you are talking about civil war, that means
communist
in Chinese nationalists.
Right.
And they are the same part of the different parts of one country.
Right.
warring factors. But when the civil war ends, that means two parts come together. And Chinese government also says that we need to negotiate for the confidence building measures. When they say confidence building measures, that means Taiwan needs to stop purchasing arms from the United States. And they also want to sign an agreement before the unification. And at the very end, they want the motherland's total unification. So they want all this process. And we already enter into the first phase. That is One China framework or One China principle. And it's very dangerous if China pressure Taiwan to enter into the second phase.
Is that the reason that Washington, D.C. is reluctant to sell the F-16, 17 to Taiwan?
Some people were saying that, but I think the Chinese government seemed to be putting pressure on both the KMT government and Washington, D.C. not to sell F-16 CDs to Taiwan. But I think a more dangerous situation for Taiwan will be the private motivation of President Ma himself. He's already sent his Mainland Affairs Council chairperson to visit China. And now the Chinese director of Taiwan Affairs Office will visit Taiwan.
So he openly mentioned that to his own people in Taiwan.
That's right. Mentioned that he's willing to visit China. Mr. Ma wants to visit China to meet with Xi Jinping. And this seems to be a big political favor President Ma is asking the Chinese government. President Ma's popularity is very low, but he wants to go down the history as somebody who has achieved something across the Taiwan Strait. And that's a big political favor. And that is a high time for the Chinese government to come in and pressure the Ma administration that you have to accept this and that in order for us to meet with each other. And that is something a lot of people in Taiwan are worrying about.
Not only people in Taiwan, I believe people in Japan, same thing. And our Prime Minister, Mr. Abe, maybe it's not about time to talk about Senkaku Island anymore. There's another even bigger issue. It's a Taiwan issue. So you were in Japan about a couple of weeks ago. What kind of impression you get from Japanese administration?
Well, the impression I had from our Japanese friends is that they seem to be worrying about President Ma and his posture toward China or Japan. Right now, they feel very comfortable that Taiwan is not unified with China.
Not yet.
Not yet. Taiwan is still serving as Taiwan and a friend of Japan and a major ally of the United States in East Asia. We still have a Taiwan Relations Act with the United States, and therefore they still feel comfortable right now. But when they look at the posture of Ma's administration toward Japan and China, they worry. They worry quite a lot. They worry that Taiwan might move too close to China. And if Taiwan is moving too close to China, it will be something that the Japanese would definitely worry because China and Japan are having terrible relations with each other right now. And if Taiwan is too close to China, that means Japan will need to fight alone if there's going to be a conflict. And under that kind of circumstances, I see that Japanese friends also showed their worry about the possible trend of Taiwan's political relations with China.
After commercial, can you tell us what would Americans feel about this situation? Thank you. Dr. Wu, this kind of situation, well, we all understand Japan really worry, and Japan and America has a peace treaty. I'm pretty sure America worries too. What do you, especially you're in Washington, D.C., what kind of information or feedback from American government, how they look at the Taiwan situation?
From Washington, D.C., that is a different perspective.
Is that right?
Yes. In Japan, even though they worry about President Ma, but when they see me, they seem to be very happy that the DPP seem to be making a comeback. And they're so much more comfortable in dealing with the DPP because they understand that the DPP psychologically, emotionally, they feel much closer to Japan. And Washington, D.C. doesn't seem to be the same story. If you flash back to 2012 presidential election, Washington D.C. did not seem to be very.
Yes, they supported Ma Ying-jeou.
They supported Ma Ying-jeou, and they didn't seem to be a favor of a DPP presidential candidate at the time. The reason why they are more sympathetic to President Ma Ying-jeou is because President Ma Ying-jeou is closer to China.
That means America is fond of China too. Then,
Exactly.
although they have.
That's how we feel, and that's
Although
not
there's
good.
so much economic friction over there, China and America.
That's right.
And
That's
yet,
right. Sometimes we feel that maybe Washington D.C. is in dilemma itself,
not thinking too
or
much.
contradiction in its own actions. You know,
Right.
they speak about democracy, democracy being the cornerstone of American foreign policy, things like that.
Human rights.
Human rights, but when he talks about Taiwan's democracy, then now
Ignored.
it's our national interest first. So it's a contradiction.
So Taiwan had better standing on their own 2 feet,
There you go. I think that's the right way to
and so
say
is
it.
Japan too.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. The United States has been troubled by a lot of trouble spots. You know, for example, Iran, Iraq, or
Now it's
Libya,
Crimea.
now Crimea.
Right.
And I think the decision makers in Washington D.C. they don't want to see any other crisis.
Another trouble.
The conflict in between Japan and China is bad enough. The trouble of North Korea is also
Yes,
terrible.
yes.
And South China Sea is also a tension spot. And therefore, the United States doesn't want to hear that there's tension in between Taiwan and China. And therefore, whoever seems to Washington, D.C. that is able to bring down the tension in between Taiwan and China, it's good for them.
Do you think Obama can do it?
I think Obama is happy to see President Ma Ying-jeou in power. The reason is because Taiwan doesn't seem to be giving trouble. But I think this is a rather short-sighted way of looking at China's expansion. If Washington, D.C. is looking at Taiwan not causing trouble, and the reason why Taiwan is not causing trouble is because Beijing feels happy, that is rather easy for Beijing to play that game against every other country in the region. They can do it to Japan, and I think Japan is feeling the heat right now because China is telling Washington, D.C. that Abe is doing this bad thing, Abe is doing that bad thing.
And so it's like, Dr. Wu also is South Korea.
Exactly. And then if you go to South China Sea area, the Philippines is standing up to China's pressure, and maybe China can come in and say to the Philippines that you don't do this, you cannot do that. And maybe Washington, D.C. is going to say that maybe the Philippines is causing a little trouble as well.
Oh boy.
So I think we need to have a coherent and coordinated and unified way of looking at China's rise and the way China is causing trouble for all these countries, all these friends of the United States, and we should come up with unified actions against China.
Is that the reason why Mr. Abe went all the way, avoided China and Korea and all the way of these South Asian ASEAN countries?
Yes, trying to work with India, trying to work with Vietnam and Southeast Asian countries and the Philippines, and he also has a special affection toward Taiwan. And I think this should be the way to do it. If Taiwan and Japan and all these Southeast Asian countries can work together, share information with each other on how China is treating these countries, maybe we can have a more unified stand against China. Good. Look at China's announcement of ADIZ. It's definitely causing trouble.
Yes.
But look at the way the United States is reacting to the Chinese announcement of ADIZ. It doesn't seem to be a coordinated way of, between Japan and the United States. And I just don't think that is the right way to do it. I think Japan and the United States have a defense treaty.
Yes.
And the two best friends in East Asia need to work with each other in dealing with the same source of threat. By the same token, Taiwan has a Taiwan Relations Act with the United States. And Taiwan look at the United States as the best friends in the world, either from economic sense or security sense. And Taiwan and the United States need to look at each other and say to each other that we need to work out a same posture toward China. By looking at Taiwan and say that don't provoke China, just stay calm and try not to anger China, it's not a way to do it, because that would allow China to dictate the terms Taiwan's behavior. and that is not right.
So, Dr. Wu, you're in Washington, D.C. Apparently, that's your duty to make a safe of Taiwan. And also, I would like to ask you if, do you think there's a possibility that Taiwan will be eventually independent, safe, beautiful country in the world, join the United Nations?
That is our hope, and that is our dream. I spoke quite a few times publicly that we have a dream, we have a common inspiration, and that common inspiration is that Taiwan is respected by the rest of the world as an independent country, and the people of Taiwan have the same rights as the rights of any other country's citizens to join major international organizations such as the World Health Organization or United Nations. And that's our dream, that's our inspiration, and we'll continue to work to see whether that can be realized. But at this moment, the more important thing is to make sure that we get supported in Taiwan so that we have a chance to engage in that kind of pursuit of our inspiration. And we also need to take into the consideration of our best friends in Japan or in the United States to make sure that they understand that the DPP, my political party, is not causing real troubles in East Asia. And therefore, what I can tell you, our policy right now is that we regard Taiwan as a de facto independent country. And we want to build our relations with the rest of the world from that perspective. You know, if you look at Taiwan right now, we have a president, publicly elected president. You know, even though I don't like President Ma Ying-jeou, he only has a 9% support rating, but he's democratically and publicly elected anyway, and he represents this independent country. We also have a parliament, even though a couple of weeks ago we had terrible situation happening to our parliament, but at least this parliament is democratically and publicly elected and also represent Taiwan's sovereignty. And we also have a ministry, we have military, and we also have a MOFA, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, that issue visa.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Passport.
Passport and visa, these very important symbols of sovereignty. And the government in Taiwan also exercises exclusive jurisdiction over the territory under its control. And it's only the people in Taiwan that vote in Taiwan's election. And it's only the people of Taiwan are taxed by the Taiwan government. And it's only the people of Taiwan that serve in Taiwan's military. So if you put all this together, Taiwan is an independent country. Right.
It's just waiting for the whole international community to recognize.
That's right.
That's it.
And what we want is to safeguard this status quo.
Until that day comes.
That's right. To safeguard this status quo until the day comes that we will be able to join United Nations or World Health Organizations and to enjoy the same right as citizens of any other country.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wu, and I know you have been doing so much things for Taiwan, and you're still very young, and please keep going and make all the Taiwanese people, 23 million Taiwanese people, dream comes true.
Thank you.
Thank you so much after 3 weeks talk, and appreciate very much. Thank you.
You're absolutely welcome.